Oh my, is not the media a little fired up about a speech that Donald Trump made on the weekend?
This was not some meandering off-message comment. Trump's allusions to political violence are not merely rhetorical. His supporters take them literally. That's part of the big problem here.
When the former president, who's already incited violence among his followers, says that there's going to be a bloodbath, he is telling us what he is going to do.
What I heard was a continuation of the same rhetoric, the same endorsement of political violence that we've seen from Donald Trump for years.
The problem is that's not what he said. In fact, if you have a listen to everything he said before and everything he said after bloodbath, he's talking about cars.
China now is building a couple of massive plants where they're going to build the cars in Mexico and they think that they're going to sell those cars into the United States with no tax at the border. Let me tell you something to China. If you're listening, President Xi, and you and I are friends, but he understands the way I deal, those big monster car manufacturing plants that you're building in Mexico right now, and you think you're going to get that, you're going to not hire Americans, and you're going to sell the cars to us. No, we're going to put a 100% tariff on every single car that comes across the line, and you're not going to be able to sell those cars. If I get elected, now, if I don't get elected, it's going to be a bloodbath for the whole. That's going to be the least of it. It's going to be a bloodbath for the country. That'll be the least of it.
Let's discuss this and a whole lot more with Nicholas Rees, the Deputy Lord Mayor of Melbourne, and the man who, would prefer to be in Yeppoon, but alas, he is where he is, which is Canberra, because it's kind of the job he applied for. Senator Matt Canavan. Now, Nick, today around the water cooler of the University or the City Council, bloodbath. Is that the first time that you actually heard the context of why he said what he said?
Look, Paul, I'm such an American political tragic that I may have already seen the footage. And look, I do tend to agree with you in some respects. I do agree that often there are liberal elements of the American media who do tend to overreact to some of the things that Donald Trump says. That doesn't mean I don't think that a Donald Trump presidency would be an absolute disaster for America and the world, because it most certainly would be. But I also can see that, yes, sometimes the liberal press does overreact on these things.
Good. Now, look, don't get me wrong. There's plenty out there if you want to go and find it about weird things that have been said, and I think sort of the minute silence for the people in jail is okay. Anyway, a lot of kook between now and November that they're going to work through. But, Matt, I did love watching everyone. And look, I played it last night as an example of what had happened on the weekend, but I didn't quite realise what the reaction was. But it is amazing that literally you could just take 3 words out of the middle of a sentence that has nothing to do with what they all go off and repeat that it is something to do with. He very obviously is talking about economic consequences, but it's a bit of an example about how in the next 8 months, when there's no more primaries, that every single word is going to matter, because how it gets cut up and spun around is how he goes from the bloke leading in the polls to a lot tighter than I think many people think it's going to be.
Well, being from Queensland, Paul, and you're right, I'd much prefer to be up there. We're pretty familiar with bloodbaths. It was a big one on the weekend for the Labor Party out in Ipswich West and Inala. It was a complete and total bloodbath out there with a 20% swing or so away from the Labor Party. But look, I actually think this probably does Trump more benefits than not, because it just completely destroys the credibility of his opponents in the media. And now, thanks to social media and 24/7 news media, people see that. They see that the likes of Jen Psaki are effectively lying about what he said. And then when they go to criticise about something else, maybe a legitimate criticism of something else he says, their critiques will be lessened, because they don't have credibility anymore. And it's why most people are just losing faith in the mainstream media. And God forbid we ever have some kind of government regulators imposing a misinformation or fact-checking type approach, because there's just so many lies in the mainstream media that no one should be allowed to police this stuff. I think people can understand it for themselves.
No, I know it's a horribly gendered term, but the boy who cried wolf comes to mind here about some of the things that they want to turn. If you want to update that into woke circles, you can say that they cried wolf. Nicholas?
Well, hang on, Paul. I mean, you can't, criticise the sort of liberal media for going over the top with their coverage of Donald Trump and not admit that you yourself, Paul, sometimes go over the top when it comes to covering Joe Biden. I mean, I sit here week after week while you play that sort of scary music.
That's not the issue, though.
Have Joe Biden, who by his own admission suffers from a speech impediment, and you know, you quite cruelly tease him about that and don't acknowledge that he's had a lifelong speech impediment. But he's done perfect. He's managed perfectly well and been very successful with. So I mean, you've got to call bias out on all sides, including your own.
Nicholas, to go whacking me like that. You've walked up in the prison yard and you've whacked the bloke you think's the bully. Well, guess what's going to happen for the next 25 minutes? Your mic's going to be a little bit lower, and Matt can say whatever the hell he wants.
Ringing the bell, just ringing the bell on you there, mate.
Well, I'm being polite in my response, not ringing it back at you.